the need to say more than simply, well, I believe in God, maybe you don't, I do. No, that's not really giving an answer for the question of the reason that is within us as the hope that we have. Rather specific things. First of all, as we look at God's world, but through the eyes of His Word, we can say very confidently, creation implies a creator. Now, by the way, I wanted deliberately to get some alliteration on this, not only with the C's, but even with words beginning with I following it. And at first I thought, well, is this kind of a stretch to bring in the word implied? I actually looked up often as I use the word. I looked it up in the dictionary, and it not only can mean simply suggesting in a vague way, but there's a second dictionary definition that means something that necessarily follows, as in this statement, for example. Drama implies conflict. You don't have a drama if you don't have conflict. You don't just show people sitting around at a picnic eating hamburgers or something and nothing goes wrong. That's not a drama. It may be pleasant, but drama implies conflict. A creator implies, or creation rather, implies a creator. And it's right in the Bible. Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power, and His divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what it has been made, so that people are without excuse. The Bible says, here is revelation for you. No wonder, I may have this wrong, but I think it was Kepler, the astronomer, who talked about thinking God's thoughts after him as he began to explore the universe. And at first I thought that was a bit of a stretch, but it is exactly what God has intended that we be able to do. He has made this world in such a way that we don't really have an excuse for not understanding a couple of things we'll take a look at today. One real-life example, and I'll give you plenty more before the hour is over, but a man who would certainly underscore this first statement is Wernher von Braun. You may well recall him as the father of the United States rocket and space program, and he felt that the evidences of a creator were so strong that he made the statement one time, I cannot envision the creation without the concept of a creator. And that's what I mean by saying creation implies, it necessarily involves a creator for a couple of reasons. What I tried to do is put in today's English a couple of long words that I'll try to avoid if possible, unless they slip in accidentally, but a couple of traditional proofs of God. And the first one boils down, it seems to me, to this. Just the fact that it's here. And that most stunning almost of all questions, why is there something rather than nothing? About as simple a question as you can get, but extremely basic. Theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking has asked that in almost exactly that same word, set of words. I want to know, he said, why the universe exists, why there is something greater than nothing. Or as he put it in an interview one time, why does the universe go through all the trouble of existence? Again, it may be for most of us in our normal everyday experience, not a question that we can ask. For that matter, it's even hard to envision nothing. Suppose I said, I want you to think of nothing. Well, for me, I guess the way I describe it is a dark room, but a dark room is not nothing. It's something, it's a dark room. But why is there something? Why is something here? I read this the other day. The believer in God has to explain one thing, the existence of suffering. And by the way, that's going to be lesson number 6 in a few weeks here. The believer has to explain one thing. The non-believer has to explain everything else. Think about it. Why are there many things rather than nothing? Well, a couple of traditional answers that just don't quite make it, especially this first one that really goes back. The universe has always existed. goes back not only to Aristotle, but even way before Aristotle. I find the Hindu doctrine of creation rather tricky, and so I hesitated at first to refer to it, but I think I would say now it goes back probably to the ancient scriptures of the Hindu faith, the Vedas and so forth, where basically the universe is just here. And that's the way Bertrand Russell put it in the 20th century, this brilliant guy. But what about the universe and its origin? Well, it's just here, that's all. The universe has just been here eternally. As I say, many of the Greek thinkers assumed that, but there are a couple of problems with that, and it's not faith versus science, it's science challenging this lack of faith by, for one thing, the second law of thermodynamics. I can't explain that in just a few sentences, but basically the supply of usable energy begins to dwindle. Energy itself does not diminish, but the usable supply, as it goes from a high concentration into entropy, or kind of scattered out where it can't do much good. That happens, and why then has there not been the heat death of the universe that theory would predict? Why has that not occurred long ago? Also, I don't know about your view of the Big Bang Theory, but that's what really has shot this one. That's what really has shot this ancient steady state theory that is generally, the eternality of the universe is generally preferred by scientists. Einstein didn't like to have to give that up, but that is a very traditional view. It simply was there. The stuff has just been there. Is that satisfying to you? It really isn't to me, for more reasons than just those two I gave you. The next one would be everything came from nothing, or maybe a better way to put it, by nothing, except that, as I mentioned in the handout, it's more often phrased from chance. And I really like R.C. Sproul's comment on the meaning of chance. It gets a bit philosophical today, but if you can follow this with me, chance is really no thing. It has no weight, no measurements, no power. It's merely a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. It can do nothing because it is nothing. To say that the universe was created by chance is to say that it came from nothing. Because chance really is nothing. It's our mathematical estimation that if somebody flips a coin 100 times, you could probably take the bet if somebody says, oh, I bet I can get it to come up ahead 65 times. Then you're probably wise, if you're a betting person, to bet against that. But there's nothing that says for sure that you're going to win the bet, and chance will not cause anything. It'll be the sum total of the force exerted on the coin, and maybe whether there's any kind of draft in the room or whatever other physical factors may be. Chance itself is nothing. It's our estimation of, is this likely to happen, that you'll get 65 heads out of 100. So it really is nothing. It's not caused at all. Somebody once said, a scientist at the University of Oxford, said that a proponent of the Big Bang Theory, if he is an atheist, must believe that the universe came from nothing and by nothing. Now, covering this is an ancient argument, grows out of the Middle East, the present-day Iraq, actually, I believe, in the 13th century, the Kalam argument, which gets quoted a surprising number of times today. Oh, there's that word. I thought I had avoided that. It's traditionally, this is called the cosmological argument, and that means how the cosmos came into being. And it's a simple little syllogism. Whatever begins to exist, and it's important to keep the word begins, because this does not apply to God, who is eternal, and has not begun. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. And then we can add to that the ultimate cause of the universe comes from outside the universe. It doesn't just cause itself, but rather the universe is caused by God. And yet that still gets overlooked. Stephen Hawking did, well, the universe could have sprung into existence spontaneously without a creator. And not only does this violate the Kalam argument, which is not necessarily always 100% for sure accurate, but it's generally pretty well accepted. Not only violates that, though, but I think to many of us it sounds a bit on the fantastic side. That first of all, there was Absolutely nothing. Not even that dark room that always comes to my mind when I try to think of what nothing is. It's just nothing, and then something, and then everything. You can go with that, okay. But if you do that without anything else, without guiding, intelligent source, then I would say that kind of moves beyond the point where I can follow you. So first of all, there's that argument. The very fact that something is there means that it began to exist and therefore was caused, but also because it was so intricately designed. Now, I know that a common theory in attacking the Christian faith was put, for example, as Bertrand Russell did, when he called life and existence in general an accidental collocation of atoms. Now, it's interesting. Bertrand Russell, the brilliant 20th century mathematician, said that. One other guy I can think of who said the very same thing happened to live 2,100 years earlier, a guy named Lucretius, who lived in Rome around 50 BC, said exactly the same thing, a little different translation in English, but was well aware that the universe might well be composed of atoms. And then push that back 300 years to a guy named Democritus in Greece, who was born in 460 BC, and he learned that from his mentor, and they said about the same thing. Isn't it amazing what those Greeks and Romans knew? I mean, they postulated the existence of atoms 2,400 years before they were finally conclusively proven to exist. But anyway, is the world just an accidental popping into being? No plan? Nothing in the universe, as I like to put it, nothing any brainier than a stone, and yet from that comes this intricate design. Well, Richard Dawkins, and I'll be quoting him quite a bit in this lesson and the one on evolution and creation 2 weeks from now. Richard Dawkins is probably the world's most outspoken, straightforward atheist, and he wrote in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, and I put this in your handout. This is a famous phrase that gets quoted a lot. Biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. Kind of an interesting weasel word there, appearance. Is this just an appearance? Or is it? I'm trying very much in our time together to be as simple as I can when it comes to the basic outline. And I'm going to recommend that as we talk about this, and we'll have time again today to share this at our tables, that we think of just an item or two that might really strike us. And my candidate is way ahead in first place for me, just personally, so much that this would come in way ahead of everything else when it comes to the intricacy with which life is endowed. And it's this, and I've got it there on your handout. That not only is DNA extremely complex, even Dawkins admits, he's the one who said that it's equal in its coded value, its information value, to the 30 volume. I don't know if they even published the Encyclopedia Britannica anymore, but at that time, a few years ago, it was equal to 30 volumes of that very hefty encyclopedia. But this is what gets me. This is my candidate if I were talking to somebody at Starbucks and trying to explain the intricate design. If you took one, we all have thousands of miles of DNA within us, by the way, which is a marvel in itself. If you took just one strand, one defining strand of that DNA from every person who ever lived on the face of the earth, it would fit into a teaspoon. Now, keep on that. With room left over, but I'm not going to worry about the room left over. Just if you could get there, just to be absolutely astounded. I'm going to bring this up not as a fact, but I want somebody to challenge it because I can't believe it. I went back and replayed the tape on this by a scientist named Robert Hazen at George Mason University. I replayed it 4 times because I thought my hearing has got to be going. So somebody, preferably later on, one-on-one, can correct me on this. But I played it 4 times, and unless he was drinking something other than water as he was lecturing, he said, you produce new red blood cells at the rate of 2.5 million per second. That's what's got to be wrong. So again, if somebody knows the answer, don't be too brazen about it, but in a very subtle way, take it aside, because I have my doubts. But I know I do hear spectacular things like that, or certain particles from outer space, and the millions that go through our fingernails every minute or every second. I mean, there are amazing things in this world. Granted, we don't understand them, but we don't understand either way. And was all this put together by something dumber than a stone? I mean, this is an amazing, I mean, outer space. I've got to stop, because I'm going to move on to the next point, or else I get into some of my love of talking about space. But I do want to point out the Alfred North Whitehead quote, because he was certainly not an Orthodox Christian, who says that basically modern science was born and could have been born only in a Christian thought form. You can see the argumentation that he has. I've got a whole book on that by Rodney Stark called The Victory of Reason, whose thesis is basically that Christianity could not and did not arise in cultures other than that which was influenced by Christianity. Even in the vaunted Arab world, the Middle Ages, around the 12th and 13th century, it was mostly non-Arabs who came up with that. And then I heard a guy who I think is a Christian in a series of lectures who said that Newton, who basically in many ways is the father of modern science, was so convinced of the design in the world that he said, we can study this, we can know this. This is not beyond our understanding, which remember is exactly what Romans 1:20 said. We can clearly understand. Now, it doesn't mean that we can explain in any detail at all, but at least we can describe, at least we can understand something of the wonder and the grandeur and the amazingness of God. And once in a while, scientists are just bowled over by this and change their faith as a result. Anthony Flew, the English atheist scientist, changed before his deathbed. He just could no longer resist this incredible argument from design. And while he probably did not become an Orthodox Christian, he knew that there needed to be some sort of personal creator. This stuff does not get put together by something as dumb as a rock. This is a process that has clear intention to it. All right, let's jump ahead. I've got to get to these other topics, because conscience is another very important. I quote this famous, at least I've heard it many, many times, phrase from the life of Immanuel Kant, the very influential philosopher. His father was a pastor, I'm sure as I recall, and his mother used to tell him about two great things that really ought to stir up awe and wonder: the starry heavens above and the moral law within. Especially that second part of the first two. Kant really took to heart and spent a lot of time philosophizing about it. But again, it's very biblical. Romans 2:14 and 15, when Gentiles who don't have the law, they haven't been told specifically what the law of God is, nonetheless often will do by nature things required by the law. And so they become, in a certain sense, custodians of the law, even though they don't have it formally, because they show that the requirements of God's law are written on their hearts, their consciences. So this is very biblical. Also bearing witness, and their thoughts, and this is what conscience can do, not only guide you to what you probably ought to be doing at a given time, but it can make you feel good about what you did or accuse you that you didn't live up to it. And that's exactly what the Bible says happens in this natural realm, where there is a kind of innate sense that there is an oughtness about life, not just what is. It is what it is. But sometimes it ought to be what it isn't. And that's virtually innate. I mentioned some examples, and I suppose you could argue that they learned it. Well, we won't get into all that, but little children certainly at a young age are able to learn it, or put it that way. It must strike some kind of chord within them that they can say the things and have that elemental sense of fairness that they do. Atheists will often live a much better lifestyle than they taught. Thanks be to God that atheists are so often inconsistent and illogical when it comes to working out the implications. Quite seriously. I've been a close friend of at least two atheists in my life, really close friend. And thanks be to God, they're much better persons that their philosophical and theological framework would indicate that they would be. Well, this is not something apart from God. This is the gift of God. That God does implant within us a sense of the oughtness in life, which really wouldn't be there if it's simply a matter of, oh, what is, and it's all good for you if you like it, and that's it. No, that would not work. My favorite example is kind of a light-hearted one, but this Richard Dawkins I was talking about, it will have statements like, sorry, but evolution gives us absolutely no grounds for any moral behavior whatsoever. That's tough, but you just have to live. But he has himself a deep sense of oughtness in life, certain things that are right and wrong, and my favorite, because it is a lighter story here, is when he was at a cricket game. He's at Oxford. And when he was at a cricket game, and he got mad that one of the English players cheated, and Dawkins is English, so this wasn't just protecting his own. The English player cheated against the Australians, and Dawkins just got so mad, and he just wouldn't get out of this fit for a long, long time, and people chided him a little bit. He didn't see the humor in it. But hey, that guy was just dancing to his own DNA, as you tell us. It didn't work at all. Fortunately, he lived a better life, even though some of his ideas of what's right and what's wrong would certainly not pass the standard test of Christian faith. He thinks, for example, religious indoctrination of children, he thinks is terrible. But given those severe flaws, the point is he does have a sense which transforms a mere evolutionary urge for survival, or I'm going to root for my team no matter what. So thanks be to God that because of God's gift of the conscience, there can indeed be better behavior than theology. And I mentioned the different rules of society here. We need to go into that at length. The guilt that I point out here, which is the second part of conscience. Conscience tells you, as the Bible has told us if we read it from Romans 2, will tell you that you ought to do certain things and then either commend you or condemn you when you do or don't do what you know you should. And I mentioned just to take something in from another culture to show how widespread this is, where Confucius talks about the Tao, the way of living of even a Chinese religion called Taoism, but he then says, I don't know if anybody has ever kept it. C.S. Lewis is the huge one on this, especially in his book, Abolition of Man. And when Francis Collins, you may know that name, he was the head of the Human Genome Project. He's an MD, he has a doctorate in chemistry, but even though he was impressed by things in the universe and the intricacy that we talked about in the first topic, what really got to him more was his reading of C.S. Lewis. Well, actually what got to him first was the witness of some of his Christian patients and their faith as they were dying, which to him made no sense at first in a materialistic world, a world of only matter and energy. And so that really got his eyes open. And then it was a reading of Lewis and a sense of the innate moral law, which really got him to thinking more and more in the terms that eventually led him to becoming a Christian. He was just convinced that it was higher than moral law. So people do, even though I try to stress over and over again, we don't clobber people into faith, people do get convinced by some of this. It's hard for the heart to love what the mind can't accept. So the two of them go together. We need both always. And you'll see that in our third category, which I need to get to now, about Christ, that ultimately I try in virtually each of these lessons to give us a springboard for a more personal heart-to-heart testimony in terms of our relationship with God. Now this last one doesn't usually fit in most apologetic schemes with the first two, but I wanted to include it, not simply because it begins with C, but because Jesus Christ is absolutely crucial, and people don't expect this, I don't think, to be brought up as an argument for God. We're going to talk about this a lot in 3 weeks in the lesson on how can you say Jesus is the only way. And I have something that I hope you'll find helpful in terms of really being able to remember on a moment's notice things that we can say that support very strongly the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. But I think in general, if you take a look at this, when you've got some time here, bringing up to a question the whole phenomenon of Jesus. That how do you handle this? Again, I try to put it into detail here, far more detail than I have time to talk about right now. But Timothy Keller sums it up well, and I quote that in the handout in his book, The Reason for God. Writes to skeptics and says, it's not simply enough to believe that Jesus did not rise from the dead. You must then come up with a historically feasible explanation for the birth of the church. And that's just one of several arguments that I will try to give you in 3 weeks here. This is a crucial one as you bring in Jesus to this. Hugh Ross, who became a Christian after many years of atheism, Hugh Ross says that he thinks the real big question today, and he may well be right, the real big question today is not, does a God exist or not, but rather, is God personal? And so when we talk about Jesus, it gives us an entree. When we have some time for table talk, I want this to be part of our conversation, please, that we can use this opportunity as a chance to talk in very personal terms about the fact that while God's invisible qualities in terms of his power, his designing intelligence and so forth can clearly be seen from the things that have been made in the world all around us, in Jesus we know that incredible fact, this unbelievable, immense, intelligent, powerful, omniscient God, unbelievably someone loves me. That's the huge gap. I mean, I think at some point, talking with a skeptic, we need in some way to say what it means that we can actually have a relationship with Jesus Christ. So I hope that the form I put this in will at least enable us to remember a couple out of these three, where we talk to people in terms of why do you believe in God, Christ, conscience, creation. And I'll bet there are theologians right in this room, astute enough, who could guess a sign of God that begins with the letter C. Something I'd be particularly likely to think about around 10 o'clock in the morning. Talk to brilliant theology, that we did last week to take some time for any questions, or I would deeply appreciate any additions, maybe some facts about around us, the moral law or anything else that are astounding to you that we can all think about. First one, I want to thank Ed Russell very much. He checked this out for me. Believe it or not, it is true that 2.5 million red blood cells are formed every second, according to the National Institute of Health. Unless they just have faster blood cells in that particular organization. Apparently that's a universal law. I appreciate that very, very much. And that is one then that I think I will want to remember and use along with my teaspoon analogy. But before we go into table talk, and once again, table talk will be just a chance for us to kind of practice. And my suggestion would be in each of these categories, well, the first two particularly, try to pick a couple of examples, maybe just even one in each category, or if you've got more than one, fine. And just share them conversationally. Again, this is kind of a practice thing for our hypothetical encounter with somebody, to use my common example, at Starbucks or someplace where you get to talking and they ask you a question, they find out you just come from church. And, well, I go to church, but I don't see any reason to believe in God. Wow, and then suddenly there you are. You're not going to remember a whole lecture. But if you could think of maybe a couple of the major outline points and then be able to fill that in. And one that, again, thanks to Ed, that I would not hesitate to use now is how in the world do 2.5 million cells, just two? Just two. Well, we want to be accurate. Okay, strike that from the record. Oh, measly 2 billion, okay, that's per second though, per second. Isn't that incredible? Anybody have any other examples or questions about this topic? Yeah, Terry.
I like to go back to the Michael Bailey argument.
Oh, yeah.
There's a really great video that you put out, and many of us have seen it in this class, and I actually maybe 4 years ago, but his argument about how intricate the design is for DNA to work And for those molecules to line up and everything, it's just incredible. So for that to just randomly happen, it's such a stretch that when he goes through the details, you understand why a whole bunch of scientists got together and go, let's leave God out of it and just say it's got to be designed by somebody. You can pick whatever God, but it's got to be intelligently designed. So I like to use that argument, and then it's a compelling video because he's a professor at a university.
Yeah, I hope you all heard that. Michael Behe, I'll be talking about him a fair amount in a couple of weeks from now, again in our session on evolution and creation. His concern with irreducible complexity, as he calls it, I think is a very valid one. It's been attacked. I don't think it attacks our years as a thesis. And Terry was saying that there's an excellent video about him or on him or by him, so you can check with Terry if you're interested in following that up. And
when somebody comes to me and talks about the Big Bang Theory, I say I watch the movie or the TV show weekly, but
Big Bang Show, okay.
in Genesis 1:3, and God said, you don't think that was a Big Bang?
I would think so. I would think so. God said something, it would be a big bang to me.
On the question of the existence of the universe, I heard someone say that the atheist has to believe that nothing times no one equals everything.
Hey, that's good. Nothing times no one equals everything if you're an atheist. Yeah, well put. Very well put. Those are good things to keep in mind that we can share in a simple way. What else? Yeah.
I like your reference to blindness, and I use that as a logical link to the existence of God. If a person is born without vision and never has had eyes, and you were to ask that individual, explain the color of X, red and blue, the answer would be so elusive as to not be producible.
Yeah.
And so the idea is, if you ask an atheist, do you believe in God? And he says, I don't believe in God. Then at least in the spiritual life, he has a perception of God. That would not be answered. And so a true atheist would answer, I don't believe in what? Yeah, not God. Because by just saying the word, there is already the spiritual perception of creation. And so it is impossible for the answer to reside on non-belief of God. You have to have a spiritual, or even physical, have that eye. And therefore, we accept the fact that there is a link of God to the atheist.
Hope you all heard that, and I won't try to repeat it all, but it's too well said for me to be able to duplicate that. But even the atheist has some kind of link with God, given by God to the atheist. Thank you. Well said. Anybody else? Oh, yes.
I don't have a lot of literature or anything to back this up, but it's my perception of reading about cultures all around the world, and as far back in history as we can get any kind of record. But one of the marks of being a human being is that you have inside you a perception of something greater than yourself, something bigger, more powerful, beyond yourself. You might not know what to call it, a perception of God.
And all cultures have people that have a sense that there is something greater than oneself, which can be called by different names. Yeah, I think that fits quite well. Something greater than oneself. And also I meant to mention that in C.S. Lewis's book, The Abolition of Man, he goes very specifically, culture by culture, everything from the Old Norse to Chinese, you name it, and shows a remarkable amount of similarities. Because what many of us have been taught in this day where relativistic ethics are so common is the idea that, well, this culture believes this culture over here has completely different mores. Yeah, up to a point. I certainly won't deny differences. But if you read Lewis, you'll be surprised by the similarities and how those similarities line up with especially the second part of the Ten Commandments, from about what we would call the fourth commandment onward. There is a uniformity, but as Dan first said, this sense of someone or something greater than we are, even though called by different names. So again, it's in some respects, the first two movements today are the external and the internal. And there's a similarity in people knowing there is something greater outside ourselves, but also a similarity in knowing this sense of obligation within ourselves. So we've got a double thing that, again, are both mentioned in Romans, and to which we can appeal, even if we don't see any common ground in terms of church background or Christian belief or even Christian experience. Okay, I want you to have plenty of chance to share these with others and seeing no other, I don't think I see any other hands. Oh, I do. Yes.
Bruce, could you explain Pascal's wager and this kind of discussion?
Yeah, there are two very interesting things about Pascal, quotes that I think of all the time. The wager, which talks in terms, and I found out that really grows out of a medieval obsession with gambling. I didn't realize that, but the cultural milieu is that gambling was a big thing. And so Pascal would talk about the importance of betting your life on God. If you're wrong, you lose nothing or virtually nothing. If you're right, the gain is absolutely immense. The other thing I like about Pascal, and I think I meant to say earlier and would say at some point in our sessions together, because I find it very significant. It's quoted a lot by Hank Hanegraaff on the radio, when he says, Pascal tells us that God dwells in enough light that those who want to find him can, but in enough obscurity that those who don't want him and want to run away from him are not forced to believe. Now, Richard Dawkins said, when asked, what would absolutely make you convinced that there is a God? And he had an answer. He said, okay, if you look at some DNA and with the proper decoding, you look in there and suddenly it says to you, hi humans, I am God. He said that would do it for me. But C.S. Lewis, talking about that kind of thing, not Dawkins specifically, but talking about that kind of thing, says, why do we assume that God, knowing what we know about him, is interested in that kind of forcing himself on us? So there is that element to Pascal's wager, and there is that element that God dwells in light, so that, as the Bible tells us, there is a clearness. You can understand something of the fact that God is there anyway. But in enough darkness that if somebody says, no, I don't want to believe. One guy says, Christopher Hitchens, who died a few years ago, atheist, said, look, if you hear that I had a conversion on my deathbed, do not believe it. I want nothing to do with God. Interesting, by the way, that there be that much vehemence about God in which he says he doesn't even believe. That's a clue in itself. Just like the person, hey, don't be judgmental. That's a real clue that they have a deep sense of judgment that they have on my face. So sometimes the contrary can be surprising to people's decisions.
Which then brings us to the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
How we were taught at the end, if we're bringing up how did the church go, how did it keep going, and we teach then that all the apostles and disciples said to ask for the entrance of the Holy Spirit.
If the Holy Spirit. Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for bringing that up, because as we go into our tables now and our kind of practicing, again, I urge you to keep in mind always, and I'm really speaking to myself, because I can get wound up in some of this sort of stuff, obviously, and forget that ultimately, I'm never going to be able to clobber somebody into faith. And as I've said now more than once, the point is not to win an argument, it's to win a person. And if we're dependent upon the Holy Spirit, ask for guidance in a way that after trying to work on some of these intellectual objections that are really not intellectual objections in the sense that they're probably motivated by something else, but they don't have to appear as these blocks that they so often do. But then beyond that, we really need a sense of the Holy Spirit. And that's why I urge, as you share at your tables, that you say something to each other. I tried very briefly to give my take on it, that it's interesting to me, fascinating, almost beyond description. We talk about the cosmos and so forth, but the wonder of the faith is that this same God sent his Son to die for my sins. And if we can somehow convey in some way what it means to us in a personal way, as part of the reason we give, part of the answer we give when asked for a reason, I think the Holy Spirit we'll definitely use that. So I don't want to cut any more into table talk. Let's take the 15 minutes or so we have. If you can, again, share this with each, maybe one thing in each major point that really struck you, and make sure everybody who wants to get a chance to speak.